The Usual Suspects wasn't just a clever crime thriller. It was a cinematic illusion that shattered audience expectations and redefined the modern mystery. Behind its cool noir aesthetic, the set boiled with chaos. Actors clashed, scenes were improvised out of desperation, and the now iconic ending nearly didn't make it into the movie. Today, we're pulling the curtain back on 20 weird facts about The Usual Suspects that reveal the hidden battles, bizarre accidents, and shocking improvisations that shaped this masterpiece. And wait until you hear the bonus fact, a twist almost stranger than the film itself. Stay sharp, because here we go. 1. The lineup scene was supposed to be dead serious. The police lineup scene looks chaotic and hilarious, but it wasn't planned that way. Director Bryan Singer wanted a tense, dramatic moment. But the actors, especially Benicio del Toro, couldn't stop cracking up. Del Toro mumbled his lines in such a bizarre way that Kevin Spacey and Stephen Baldwin lost control. Hours of ruined takes forced Singer to finally give up and roll with the laughter. Ironically, this failure became one of the film's most iconic scenes. What audiences didn't know was that the lineup was born out of genuine frustration, not comedy. Instead of tightening the suspense, the moment became a release valve for tension, both for the cast and the viewers. It wasn't discipline that made the scene memorable, it was chaos turned into brilliance. That accident cemented the movie's unpredictable tone where nothing feels fully in control. 2. Benicio del Toro's mumbled voice was a practical joke. Del Toro's unintelligible mumbling as Fenster wasn't a creative decision, it was a prank gone too far. The actor decided to play the role as if he had a bizarre speech pattern, partly because he thought the script's dialogue was too straightforward. Bryan Singer hated it. The producers hated it. Even his co-stars admitted they could barely understand a word he said. But Del Toro doubled down, refusing to adjust. When test audiences erupted with laughter at every one of his lines, Singer realized he couldn't fight it. Instead of cutting him down, the director leaned into it. What started as a private joke became one of the film's most quoted quirks. Del Toro himself later admitted, "If you don't know what I'm saying, neither do I." Not intentional genius, but accidental legend. 3. Kevin Spacey manipulated his casting. Kevin Spacey wasn't just cast for The Usual Suspects, he engineered it. At the time, Spacey wasn't yet a household name, but he had a knack for reading scripts that could break out. He convinced Bryan Singer to let him read the script early, then pressured the filmmakers to keep his involvement a secret. Spacey insisted his name be listed last in the opening credits to make the final twist more shocking. Audiences went in blind, not realizing he was about to dominate the story. This wasn't humility, it was strategy. By playing coy, Spacey turned Verbal Kint into the role that launched him into stardom. Not just a clever actor, but a ruthless self-promoter who knew how to manipulate narrative both on screen and off. 4. The studio wanted to kill the twist ending. The famous ending, revealing Verbal Kint as Keyser Söze, was nearly erased. Executives thought it was too confusing and feared audiences would walk out angry. Some even pushed for a straightforward gangster reveal, something more traditional. Bryan Singer fought back hard, threatening to walk from the film entirely if they tampered with the ending. He believed the whole script was built on that reveal, and without it, the movie collapsed. Christopher McQuarrie, the screenwriter, backed him, saying, "No twist, no film." Against all odds, Singer won. The executives relented, and the ending stayed. Today, that final reveal is considered one of the greatest twist endings in cinema history. Not safe, not conventional, but unforgettable. 5. Gabriel Byrne thought he was the star until the premiere. Gabriel Byrne signed on believing he was the film's anchor. He played Dean Keaton with the gravitas of a leading man, thinking the movie would orbit around him. For most of production, he carried himself as though he were the central figure. But when the film premiered, Byrne was stunned. The story had been restructured around Spacey's Verbal Kint. Audiences walked out talking about Keyser Söze, not Keaton. Byrne reportedly stormed out of the premiere, furious that his role had been overshadowed. What Byrne didn't realize was that his performance worked precisely because it was misdirection. He was meant to be the red herring, the man everyone suspected, but no one could prove. Not betrayal, but narrative sleight of hand. Still, Byrne left the night humiliated. 6. Stephen Baldwin. Almost got fired. Stephen Baldwin clashed with Bryan Singer from the start. He refused to read his lines exactly as written, improvising instead. Singer hated the unpredictability. At one point, the tension boiled so badly that Singer threatened to fire Baldwin on the spot. But Baldwin refused to back down. He argued that his rebellious delivery was what made Michael McManus dangerous and unpredictable. Instead of being canned, Baldwin dug in deeper. Against Singer's instincts, his rogue style added raw energy to the crew's chemistry. Ironically, the very thing that almost cost him his job ended up making him one of the film's standout presences, not obedience, but defiance. That was Baldwin's secret weapon, and it turned what could have been a flat role into one that crackled with menace. 7. The film was shot in just 35 days. The Usual Suspects looks polished and intricate, but the production was a whirlwind. Singer had just over a month to shoot the entire movie on a shoestring budget of $6 million. That meant working long days, cutting corners, and improvising solutions when things fell apart. Scenes were often shot out of order, with actors given minimal context about where their characters were in the story. This created a natural sense of confusion and tension, perfect for a mystery that thrives on misdirection. What audiences didn't see was how often chaos ruled the set. Not precision, but survival. The entire film was stitched together through sheer speed and instinct. That compressed schedule became one of the reasons the movie feels so lean, sharp, and tightly wound. 8. Keyser Söze was inspired by real crime stories. The legend of Keyser Söze didn't come from thin air. Screenwriter Christopher McQuarrie drew inspiration from real underworld figures he'd heard about while working as a detective's assistant. In particular, the name Söze was a play on Turkish slang meaning to talk too much. The myth of a criminal so ruthless he'd kill his own family came from exaggerated crime stories McQuarrie had overheard in police files. Not pure invention, but stitched together from half-truths, rumors, and street folklore. That's why the character feels so believable, because he's built on fragments of real gangster mythology. What audiences didn't know is that Söze isn't a fantasy. He's a reflection of the whispered legends passed around in criminal circles. Not invented evil, but recycled terror. 9. Kevin Pollak thought the script was a joke. Comedian. Kevin Pollak, who played Hockney, originally believed The Usual Suspects was a spoof. When he first read the dialogue, he thought it was parody-level noir with over-the-top tough guy lines. Pollak nearly turned it down, convinced the movie would tank. But when he met Singer and McQuarrie, their vision convinced him otherwise. Even during shooting, Pollak cracked jokes about how nobody's going to buy this. What he didn't expect was that the film's exaggerated noir style would become its greatest strength. Not parody, but reinvention. Pollak later admitted that what he thought was hokey ended up becoming one of the most iconic roles of his career. 10. Chaz Palminteri didn't know the ending until the last day. Chaz Palminteri, who played Agent Kujan, had no idea how the film ended until the final day of shooting. Singer and McQuarrie deliberately withheld the truth from him to make his frustration in the interrogation scenes authentic. Palminteri grew increasingly annoyed with Spacey during their scenes, believing the actor was holding something back. That real irritation fed into his performance, giving the interrogation its crackling energy. When he finally saw the completed movie, Palminteri was floored. He later said, "I felt like I was tricked just like the audience." Not scripted deception, but lived experience. His ignorance wasn't an accident. It was the filmmaker's strategy to keep the mystery alive even for the cast. And before we jump into fact number 11, go ahead and like and subscribe because the twists coming up next are even wilder than what you've seen so far. 11. The famous coffee cup drop was improvised. The unforgettable moment when Verbal Kint drops his coffee cup, revealing Keyser Söze's identity, wasn't meticulously scripted. Singer knew he wanted a physical object to anchor the reveal, but the choice of the cup came late in production. During rehearsals, Spacey casually picked up the mug while delivering his lines, and Singer told him to drop it on the final take. The smash wasn't rehearsed, so the camera captured genuine surprise from the crew. That single gesture became the visual heartbeat of the entire twist. Not CGI, not pre-planned trickery. Just a clumsy coffee cup crashing at the perfect second. The simplicity of it was what made it devastating. Audiences gasped, not realizing the entire climax hinged on an improvisation born of instinct. 12. Kevin Spacey bound himself with tape. Between takes to sell Verbal Kint's cerebral palsy convincingly, Kevin Spacey went beyond standard rehearsal. He physically taped his fingers together and bound his leg between takes, forcing himself to limp even when the camera wasn't rolling. Crew members recalled that Spacey refused to let go of the act, dragging himself around set for hours. Bryan Singer admitted he worried Spacey was going too far, but the actor insisted on the method. The result was a performance so believable that audiences never questioned it until the very last scene. What they didn't see was the toll it took: bruises, aches, and swelling from prolonged contortions. Not an illusion crafted in editing, but an exhausting commitment carried in Spacey's own body. 13. The poster was designed backwards. The marketing team behind The Usual Suspects almost sabotaged its own twist. The original poster showed the lineup with Kevin Spacey positioned dead center, drawing unnecessary attention to him. Singer intervened, insisting the poster be redesigned with Gabriel Byrne and Stephen Baldwin in dominant positions. This way, audiences would naturally suspect them first. The art department reluctantly agreed, and Spacey was tucked off to the side. That tiny adjustment made a massive difference. Viewers walked into theaters assuming Byrne or Baldwin must be Söze. Not just a poster, but a carefully crafted misdirection. Marketing became part of the con, steering suspicion away from the real culprit before the first frame even rolled. 14. Del Toro's flatulence. Delayed shooting. The cast has admitted one of the strangest on-set challenges. Benicio del Toro constantly disrupted takes with loud flatulence. Kevin Pollak later joked in interviews that Benicio's digestive system had its own role in the movie. During the lineup scene especially, del Toro would deliberately break tension with poorly timed noises, sending the entire cast into uncontrollable laughter. Hours of film were wasted because no one could keep a straight face. Singer initially scolded him, but eventually leaned into it, realizing the natural laughter helped the scene feel authentic. What audiences didn't know is that one of cinema's coolest heist crews was held hostage by one man's stubborn pranks. Not polished professionalism, but juvenile chaos captured forever on film. 15. The script was inspired by a magazine headline. Christopher McQuarrie has admitted that The Usual Suspects began with a single phrase he saw in a magazine article. The usual suspects are rounded up. The line stuck with him, sparking the idea for a group of criminals forced together by circumstance. McQuarrie later built the entire screenplay around that headline, layering in noir tropes, misdirection, and criminal folklore. What started as a throwaway phrase in print became the foundation for an Oscar-winning screenplay. Not a grand, sweeping origin story. Just one writer staring at a headline and letting his imagination spiral. That simplicity makes the film's complexity even more staggering. A global cult classic born from a scrap of words in a forgotten magazine. 16. The cast was kept in the dark about Keyser Söze. Most of the actors didn't actually know who Keyser Söze was during filming. Singer deliberately fed them conflicting information, telling some that Byrne was the mastermind, others that Baldwin was hiding something, and even hinting at del Toro as a dark horse. This tactic kept suspicion alive both on and off camera. The cast's mistrust bled into their performances, giving the group's chemistry a raw edge. Kevin Pollak later admitted, "We were all looking over our shoulders. What audiences didn't know is that the paranoia wasn't just acting, it was real, not crafted with perfect direction, but cultivated with secrets and lies on set. That manipulation was the hidden ingredient that made the ensemble feel like suspects to each other and to us. 17. The film won 2 Oscars against all odds. When The Usual Suspects premiered at Sundance, critics were divided. Some called it too confusing, others dismissed it as a stylish gimmick. Nobody expected it to become an awards darling. Yet at the 1996 Academy Awards, the film shocked Hollywood. Kevin Spacey won Best Supporting Actor, and Christopher McQuarrie took home Best Original Screenplay. For an indie film made on a $6 million budget, it was a David versus Goliath victory. Not a polished studio product, but a scrappy outsider that blindsided the industry. Its triumph proved that complex, twist-heavy storytelling could win respect at the highest level. What started as a gamble became one of the most unlikely Oscar upsets of the decade. 18. The Hungarian word, confused. Everyone. Keyser Söze's name baffled more than just audiences. It baffled the actors, too. Söze comes from a Turkish word meaning to talk too much, but Singer told the cast it was Hungarian to make it sound more exotic. Even on set, nobody could agree on how to pronounce it. Some said Söze, others Söze. Singer refused to clarify, allowing the inconsistency to seep into the performances. That's why different characters pronounce it differently in the film. Not sloppy filmmaking, but intentional disorientation. It made the mythical figure feel even more slippery, as though no one truly knew who he was. The confusion wasn't a mistake, it was part of the mystique. Söze existed in whispers, and even his name was a trick. 19. Bryan Singer, almost lost. Final cut. The studio didn't trust Singer with the editing process. After seeing the rough cut, executives pushed to re-edit the film into a more straightforward crime drama, fearing the non-linear structure would confuse audiences. Singer fought fiercely to maintain his vision, even threatening to take his name off the project. His ally was editor John Ottman, who doubled as the film's composer. Together, they shaped the movie into the intricate puzzle we know today. Not compromise, but defiance. Without that stubbornness, the film's most daring element, the manipulation of perspective, would have been gutted. What audiences didn't realize is that The Usual Suspects barely survived the editing room intact. Its very identity was hanging by a thread. 20. The ending was kept secret. Even from crew members, Singer went to extreme lengths to protect the ending. Only a handful of people knew Verbal Kint was Keyser Söze until the final week of shooting. Even crew members were misled with fake call sheets and alternate scripts. Some camera operators filmed scenes without realizing their significance. When the truth was revealed, the crew erupted in shock, just like the audience would later. This secrecy fostered genuine disbelief that translated into the editing. Not staged surprise, but authentic revelation captured behind the lens. The secrecy wasn't just a gimmick, it was the production's survival strategy. If the twist had leaked, the movie's power would have evaporated. Instead, it detonated in theaters like a cinematic bombshell. Bonus fact, the Keyser Söze twist was inspired by a real police trick. The jaw-dropping ending wasn't pure fiction. Christopher McQuarrie based Verbal Kint's final reveal on an interrogation tactic he'd learned about while working with a detective. Police sometimes confront suspects with random details from the room, posters, mugs, office clutter, and weave them into a fabricated narrative to break suspects down. McQuarrie twisted this into Verbal's masterstroke, building an entire lie from the detective's own office wall. Not invention, but reinvention of a real manipulation tool. That's why the ending feels both shocking and eerily believable. It's rooted in reality. The greatest con in movie history didn't just fool Agent Kujan. It fooled us, too, by using a real-world trick disguised as fiction. The Usual Suspects wasn't just another crime thriller. It was a gamble born of chaos, stubbornness, and accidents that somehow fused into genius. From fart jokes to studio wars, from tape-bound limbs to coffee cup improvisations, the film thrived on unpredictability. What audiences didn't see was that the movie itself was as much a con as its story. If you loved these revelations, hit that like button, subscribe for more behind-the-scenes secrets, and remember, the greatest trick this film ever pulled was convincing the world it was just a mystery, when really it was a miracle of accidents and defiance.